Good morning, and thanks for joining us today. My name is Michael Leister, and I'm the Deputy Director of Criminal Justice Improvements at the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. Today, we're going to be discussing the fiscal year 2024 Byrne SCIP Firearm Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Postvention Initiative funding opportunity. During our time today, we hope to address any questions you have about this solicitation, as well as the application process. I'm joined by a few of my colleagues today, Sam Cook and David McMeekin. Next slide, please. So just a couple quick housekeeping notes before we dive in. First, this webinar is being recorded and will be posted on PCCD's website and YouTube channel once it becomes available. Second, please check your audio settings to make sure you can hear today's presentation using your computer or other device. Additionally, you can hear us, but we cannot hear you. Attendees will remain muted during today's presentation. And finally, if you have any questions regarding today's presentation or the funding announcement, please email PCCD staff at ra-pccd-ocjsi@pa.gov. Questions submitted to that resource account will be included on our funding announcement Q&A document on our active funding announcements webpage. Next slide, please. So what we'll cover today, first we're going to do a quick PCCD overview, move into the impact of firearm suicides, talk about the grant program, review the funding announcement. We'll talk a little bit about navigating the application process and Egrants, and then we'll get into questions and answers. Next slide, please. And starting off with a brief introduction on PCCD, and we can go to the next slide then. The Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency serves as the justice planning and policy-making agency for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. PCCD's responsibilities and programs fall into a number of different areas, including funding and grants, technical assistance, data and research, victims compensation, and training, among other responsibilities. This slide shows a snapshot of what PCCD's grant funds have supported in recent years, with the overarching goal of addressing both emerging and long-standing public safety challenges. If you're interested in learning more about these areas, I encourage you to check out our website at pccd.pa.gov. And next slide, and I'm going to turn it over to Sam Cook to talk about data on firearm suicides.
Great, thanks, Michael. So good morning, everyone. Sam Cook here, Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs. So as the name of the funding announcement suggests, the focus of this new grant program is on firearm suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention strategies. So we thought it might be helpful to talk a little bit about some trends related to firearm injuries and fatalities in Pennsylvania more broadly, and firearm suicides specifically, to provide some context for this initiative. This portion of the presentation is also designed to call attention to some resources and data sources that may be useful to you as you frame and develop out your application. So heading to the next slide, while many folks may think of homicides or mass shootings when they hear the term gun violence, the fact is that the majority of gun deaths in Pennsylvania and across the nation are suicide related. And that's been true for a long time, actually. As you can see on the next slide, just zooming out a little bit, we wanted to talk about the broader context of firearm-related injuries, and also perhaps bemoan the sort of outdated map. I swear it's a good one of Pennsylvania County data. We can ship out an updated version of this maybe after the fact. But talking about kind of firearm injury and deaths in the Commonwealth, as you should have seen from this slide, the issue impacts every corner of our Commonwealth, from urban areas to smaller towns to rural communities. And so there's county level data that's actually been published by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, or CDC, on a pretty new mapping injury, overdose, and violence dashboard that was published late last year that shows some pretty significant variations in terms of the rates of firearm suicide deaths per 100,000 population here in Pennsylvania. So in 2023, Pennsylvania's statewide rate of firearm injury deaths overall was 13.9 per 100,000 residents. And that's about the same as the national rate. And so what you see when you're looking at county level data, however, is that in our state, there are some counties that have significantly higher levels of firearm fatalities than both the statewide or national average. The line graph on the right, which you can see, shows another really important data point that we've been monitoring, and that's progress. In 2023, we actually saw a decrease in the total number of gun-related deaths for the first time in 4 years. And that's certainly welcomed progress, but it's a complicated story, right? Not all communities saw declines, and firearm suicide rates actually remained pretty elevated. So heading to the next slide, as we noted earlier, more than half of firearm deaths in Pennsylvania are suicides. In 2023, provisional data showed that more than 1,000 Pennsylvanians lost their lives as a result of firearm suicide. And that's, again, data that we get courtesy of our federal partners at the CDC. So looking at the next slide, you can see that rates of firearm suicide have increased over the past 4 years from about 7.1 per 100,000 residents to 8.3 in 2023. And so as with overall firearm deaths, rates of firearm suicide deaths across Pennsylvania are pretty comparable to the national average, but they vary pretty significantly by county, which you can see on this slide. In some rural counties, for example, places like Carbon, Clearfield, and Cambria counties, firearm suicide rates are more than double that statewide average of 8.3. So you can see 18.3 deaths per 100,000 in Carbon, 18.2 in Clearfield County, and 17.6 in Cambria. So just really, really elevated rates of firearm suicide death in those areas and in many other places across the Commonwealth. On the next slide, we show that in addition to geographic variations, firearm suicide rates also vary pretty significantly by population. So as this chart of CDC mortality data shows, firearm suicide rates are highest among white populations in Pennsylvania, especially older white men, but, and that's an important but, rates of firearm suicide among Black Pennsylvanians has actually increased at a much faster rate in recent years. It's nearly doubled compared to the 2018 rate. We've also seen some concerning data related to firearm suicide rates and risk among younger Pennsylvanians, and that's a really big area of concern for us. As an example, data from the 2023 Pennsylvania Youth Survey, or PAYS as it's commonly called, showed that more than 16% of middle and high school students surveyed in Pennsylvania had seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year. And we know that with pretty easy access to firearms, firearm suicide rates among young people are unfortunately increasing. So moving to our next slide, those trends are really why PCCD and our partners across state government are doing our best to prioritize resources and attention to address the issue of firearm suicide head on. So last fall, Governor Shapiro and PCCD Chairman Lieutenant Governor Davis announced the reestablishment of Pennsylvania's Office of Gun Violence Prevention within PCCD. And one of the main areas the office is directed to focus on is firearm suicides. The funding announcement that we're discussing today is part of that broader commitment to use available funding sources to support local firearm suicide reduction and response efforts, as well as to increase attention to the issue of firearm suicide among broader suicide prevention efforts and state-level policy discussions. And this will build on a lot of really great work that's been underway across Pennsylvania at both the local and state levels. And that includes efforts from our partners at the Pennsylvania Department of Health, Department of Human Services, and Department of Education, and Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, just to name a few. You can read more about this issue, including additional data points and links to research, as well as explore our plans to coordinate a comprehensive strategy to prevent and reduce firearm suicide and address other forms of gun violence in our recently issued 2025 Pennsylvania Office of Gun Violence Prevention Initial Report and Strategic Plan, which is available on PCCD's website. And with that, I will turn things back over, I think, to Michael for the next part of our webinar.
Thank you, Sam. And we can go to the next slide, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Byrne State Crisis Intervention Program. So the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act of 2022 was enacted in June 2022 and included provisions to address gun violence and improve responses to behavioral health crises, along with new funding streams like Byrne SCIP, which provides formula funds to state administering agencies to support the implementation of state crisis intervention court proceedings and related programs or initiatives with the overarching goal of reducing gun violence. Pennsylvania's total fiscal year 2024 SCIP allocation is just shy of $5 million. The federal SCIP solicitation outlines various funding requirements for SCIP funds. States may reserve up to 60% of SCIP funds to support state-level priorities and activities. This is what we refer to as the state share. The remaining 40% must be passed through to units of local government and is referred to as the local and under 10K shares. The Byrne SCIP Firearm Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Postvention Initiative is supported by state share SCIP funds. As a requirement of SCIP, all states must develop a funding plan that is informed and approved by a mandatory Crisis Intervention Advisory Board. For purposes of SCIP planning, the full commission served as a Crisis Intervention Advisory Board. PCCD started development of our fiscal year 2024 SCIP funding plan back in November of 2024. On March 12th of this year, the commission voted to approve the funding plan, which was then submitted to the Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance, or BJA. And then on April 14th of this year, BJA approved our Pennsylvania FY 2024 Byrne SCIP funding plan. And on this page, there's a link directly to that plan. The next slide, please. Then we're going to talk a little about some other SCIP funding. So if you looked on PCC's website, you may see there are multiple SCIP funding announcements available, but wanted to highlight the fiscal year 2024 Byrne SCIP local solicitation. Through this, PCCD has just over $4 million in funding available. We're expecting to award approximately 20 grants of up to $200,000 over a 21-month project period. This funding is a combination of fiscal year 22-23 and 2024 local and under 10K funds. Eligible applicants for the local solicitation are limited to units of local government, so that's cities, counties, townships, or towns. And eligible activities under the local solicitation include supporting behavioral health responses, including crisis intervention teams, co-responders, and holistic services and programs, peer navigators, local strategies for firearm suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, adoption of lethality assessment programs, and the implementation of procedures required under Act 79 of 2018. Applications for the local solicitation are due September 10th, 2025. And on this slide, we have two QR codes. The first will take you to PCC's active funding webpage, and the second will allow you to sign up to subscribe for notifications from PCCD. Next slide. And now I'm going to turn it over to David McMeekin, PCCD's State Crisis Intervention Program Specialist, to review the fiscal year 2024 Byrne SCIP Firearm Suicide Prevention, Intervention, and Postvention Initiative. Dave?
Thanks, Michael. Good morning, everyone. I will start by reviewing the upcoming important dates for the funding announcement. The deadline for questions is September 2nd, 2025. Please be sure to send all questions to the resource account included in the funding announcement document. PCCD staff will respond to all questions through a question and answer document that is posted on our website and will be updated as we receive questions. To date, we've received one question about the funding announcement through the resource account. The current Q&A document on our website was updated as of July 8th. We will update the Q&A document with questions from the webinar after today. The deadline for all applications to be submitted is September 9th, 2025 at 11:59 p.m. All applications must be submitted electronically through PCCD's Egrants system. Over the course of the fall, PCCD and subject matter experts will review all applications received through this solicitation. Applications recommended for funding will be presented to the full commission for review and approval of December 10th, 2025. PCCD and BJA will have approval of all final budgets. After the competitive process is completed and applications approved by the full commission, successful applicants should expect PCCD staff to engage with them in finalizing budgets, which could include reductions, modifications, and/or addition of budgeted items. Once budgets are finalized, PCCD will submit all applications to BJA for approval. Additional changes to budgets or proposed programs may be required by BJA. Projects will have a start date of January 1st, 2026, pending final approval by PCCD and BJA. Next slide, please. Moving to funding availability, a total of $1 million in federal funding year 2024 Byrne SCIP state share funds is being announced to support this initiative. PCCD expects to fund approximately 4 to 6 grants with budgets not to exceed the allowable maximum for each track over the 21-month project period. Track 1 is for regional or statewide projects. Applicants seeking funds for larger scale regional projects reaching 3 or more counties or statewide projects can request up to $500,000 over a 21-month project period. Track 2 is for local projects. Applicants seeking funds for smaller scale local projects can request up to $150,000 over a 21-month project period. Next slide, please. Moving on to eligible applicants. Units of local government, nonprofit organizations, including community-based and statewide organizations, institutions of higher education, and state government agencies are eligible to apply under this solicitation. Applicants must be in good standing with PCCD to be eligible for these funds. The applicant and recipient agencies' historical success in implementing PCCD funded programs or initiatives that met their intended goals will be considered in the review process. Applicants are not required to have a prior funding history with PCCD to be eligible. This may include, but is not limited to, compliance with PCCD program and fiscal reporting requirements, state and federal funding guidelines, and acceptable risk rating as determined by PCCD. Applicants may only submit one application under this funding announcement. However, nothing prohibits an organization from making direct application and also being included as a proposed subrecipient in another eligible applicant's application. Next slide, please. Priority consideration will be given to applicants seeking funding for projects within high need areas of the Commonwealth, as demonstrated by available data sources, including locally captured data. Examples of factors for high need include, but are not limited to, areas with rates of firearm suicide exceeding the statewide average, which is 8.2 firearm suicide deaths per 100,000 population as of 2022. Also areas with populations experiencing increasing and/or higher rates of firearm suicide and rural communities. In addition to reviewer scores, other factors that may be considered include geographic diversity, other applications received for similar activities in the same geographic area region, the applicant's compliance history with fiscal and program reporting if applicable, the applicant's historical success in implementing PCCD funded program initiatives that met their intended goals, and available funding. And now I'm going to turn it over to Michael to talk about navigating the application process and Egrants.
Thanks, Dave. So where do I start with the application process? And we can go to the next slide. So first, hitting on what's required in the application. And I would really encourage everyone to thoroughly review the funding announcement document. This is included on PCCD's active funding announcements page. It's also posted in Egrants with the funding announcement. But the funding announcement document itself outlines the required and scored sections for all applications. So first, the executive summary is 5 points. This is a standard PCCD application section that asks you to give a brief overview of your project and funding requests. The budget details 15 points, and here you'll identify what funds will be used for, and the line items should be entered for each budgeted cost. The project summary is 5 points. Here you will identify which track you're applying for and the county or counties where the proposed project will take place. Next, statement of need, that's 15 points and establishes the local, regional, or statewide problem you're seeking to address. The target area and population section is 15 points and identifies where and who will be served by the proposed project. The project description and proposed activities is 35 points and provides specific details on the proposed project. The performance measures impact and outcomes section is 10 points and describes how the outcomes of the proposed project will be measured. And finally, the required attachments section is not scored, but is a section to attach any required documents, including resumes or CVs for key personnel, and then letters of support or commitment or similar documentation for all named project partners. Next slide, please. So for the application process, everything is done through Egrants. So eligible organizations must submit application using PCCD's Egrant system. All final recommendations of projects will be made following their receipt and review of applications in Egrants. And as a reminder, applications must be submitted in the Egrant system by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday, September 9th, 2025. Next slide, please. So getting started in Egrants, really to get started, there are 3 steps you need to follow. First is create an Egrants account. Second is register your organization with Egrants. And then finally is request roles in Egrants. Just want to make note that user roles are not automatically added to new applications in Egrants, so you need to do that for every single grant application you ever start. And next slide, please. So user registration, and this is a snapshot from our website, but if you go to pccd.pa.gov, there is this Egrants resources link. You want to go there. This will allow you to go to our PCCD Egrants Keystone Login and Registration Walkthrough Guide. This guide takes you through every step of registering in Egrants. And just to note that your Keystone Login username and password will be your username and password for Egrants. Next slide, please. This is the agency registration. So again, if you go to PCCD's webpage, click on the Egrants resources link. You need to have your agency properly registered in Egrants if you intend to apply for a grant. So you'll need to complete the Egrants agency registration request form, and a snapshot of that is included on the right side of your screen. But authorized officials on this form are persons with contract signing authority. So generally that's the executive director or head administrator of the agency. Once this form is completed, you'll need to submit it to the resource account, which is ra-egrantsupport@pa.gov. The next slide, please. And then going to user roles. So within Egrants, there are 6 different unique roles that folks can have within your agency on each grant. The financial creator allows you to view and create fiscal information, so you can manage the budget section, create fiscal reports. The financial reader allows you to just view that fiscal information. The program creator allows you to view and create program information, so you can manage the program section information within the application. You can create program reports, etc. The program reader just allows you to view that program information. The submission role allows a user to submit grant forms like applications, modifications, and continuations. And then the user manager is the person who can manage user roles for the agency grants. So even if you're the user manager, you will still need other roles within eGrants to actually perform work on the grant. Next slide, please. And so to make a eGrants user role request, again, you can go to our homepage and click on the eGrants resources website. If your agency does not currently have a user manager, you need one. And you can click on the new user role request form. This form can be completed as it appears on the right with selecting the agency user manager box, and you can return that completed report again to the resource account at ra-egrantsupport@pa.gov. Again, if your agency does not have a user manager, there is also a walkthrough guide to complete that, and there's a link included on this page. Next slide, please. So every agency, again, should have an agency user manager security role. So the role of the user manager is really to approve role requests, and they also maintain security for users already established within their agency. On this slide, there's a link to our user manager help guide, which I would encourage you to take a look at. Next slide, please. And just a helpful tip, every agency must register at least 2 users in order to complete their grant application. If you're a new agency and you only have 1 person registered, you will not be able to submit your grant application in Egrants. So please be sure that you have at least 2 users registered to your agency within the system. And then if you need assistance with Egrants, we have a lot of resources. We have an Egrants help desk. You can contact them Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Again, the email for the help desk is ra-egrantssupport@pa.gov. You can also call the help desk at 717-787-5887. And again, those hours are Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. We also have some QR codes on the right side of the page here. First is getting started in Egrants. Second is applicant resources. And third is grant application walkthrough. I'd encourage you to take a look at our website and walk through some of these links. There are a lot of helpful resources out there. Next slide, please. And that'll take us to our frequently asked questions. So if we go to the next slide. As we mentioned, today's webinar is being recorded and we post on our website when it's available. So please feel free to refer back to this information if needed. You can also email PCCD staff at any time at the email ra-pccd-ocjsi@pa.gov. Any new questions coming into this account will be answered and then posted on our online Q&A page, which is also linked here. We encourage you to check out the Q&A document before reaching out because your question may have already been asked and answered. And next slide. So thank you to those of you who did submit questions during the registration for this webinar. We have a few posted on the next pages. So there are 2 questions here that are very similar. So first, can this funding be used for work in schools? We have a mix of evidence-based and evidence-informed curricula and workshops in mind. And then the last question on this page, is this grant eligible for use in a K-12 setting serving youth on juvenile probation for gun-related offenses, and can it fund educational technology to support web-based curricula on suicide prevention, firearm safety, and violence reduction? So schools are not eligible applicants under this funding announcement, but I do want to pass it over to Sam Cook to offer some additional insights into these questions. So Sam, I'll hand it over to you.
Great, thanks, Michael. So, while you're not a directly eligible applicant, nothing would preclude you from partnering with somebody who is an eligible applicant. So that's advice that we will often give to folks who maybe are looking at the list of eligible applicants and not seeing themselves there. So keep that in mind. That would be advice point number 1. And advice point number 2 is if you are a K-12 school, just be aware you likely are familiar with our school safety and security grant program and some of the other youth-focused funding streams that PCCD administers. So would strongly encourage you to also think about some of the funding opportunities that you may be an eligible applicant for kind of down the road as an opportunity to also utilize available resources for some of these purposes. But I would just in general say, we certainly encourage folks to partner with school entities if they're doing youth-focused programming for their application, but school entities are not able to directly apply for this specific funding announcement. Back to you, Michael.
Thank you, Sam. So the middle question on this page, how can this funding be applied to existing CIT or LEDI programs? So we can't really answer questions about specific programming. However, if you're doing work around suicide, firearm suicide prevention, intervention, or postvention within CIT or LEDI, we would certainly welcome that application. But we'd also point you in the direction of the information we included earlier about the SCIP local solicitation, which is open now, which could definitely support CIT programs. And if we could go to the next slide then, please. So we have a question here. If we're not an eligible applicant, are we able to partner with another eligible applicant to apply for this funding? So the answer there is yes. How would that work specifically in the application process? And if the grant is awarded, the financial side of the award? Within the budget section of the application, applicants are able to include essentially recipient agencies that funds are passing through. So that's essentially be creating a second budget would be the way that that would work. And then on the financial side, if the grant is awarded, that would really be up to an agreement between your two organizations. So, you know, the way that things work on the PCCD side, on the financial side is that when fiscal program or fiscal reports are submitted, that's how the money is reimbursed. We operate on a reimbursement-based system. But again, would leave it to your two organizations to figure out exactly on the financial side how that would work. And then the last question that we received is, are organizations that serve Philadelphia a fit for this grant? Absolutely. Organizations that serve any county in Pennsylvania are welcome to apply. Would say that, you know, Philadelphia just being a single county would be only open for the second track and applications up to $150,000. Now, if an organization was planning to serve the greater Philadelphia area, including some of the collar counties, and had at least 3 counties where they were doing programming, then that applicant would be eligible for the larger track and up to $500,000. And if we could go to the next slide, please. So just really wanted to close out with some additional funding resources. Again, we have some QR codes here. The first one will take you to the PA Grants dashboard. The second one, which you've seen already, is a QR code to our active funding announcements page on our website. Here you'll see every open funding announcement and links to the Q&A documents. And then the last QR code is to sign up for eGrant alerts. And then the next slide. Just want to say thank you for joining us. We hope you found this webinar useful and informative. And please, if you have any questions moving forward, don't hesitate to email our resource account at ra-pccd.ocjsi@pa.gov. Thank you. Have a great day.